Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Let's talk about Bayer Leverkusen then, who are here and ready to go. How are they kind of set
qualifiers? Had to come through the group stage.
Before we wrap
the
up
player.
What's Bayer like?
Quite interesting. I think, like David said, they had to come through the qualifiers for this one. This is when they've got Michael Ballack, obviously, at their peak, as we'll come on and speak about. They are, I would say, sort of typically German at this time. German national team is certainly not where it would go on to be. Famously, Das Reboot, etc., was based on that Euro 2000, wasn't it? That or not based on it, but it came after that in terms of what they needed to do.
They said we get to a World Cup final at the end of this season. So I mean, I know. If that's your, I know what you mean though, because the Euro 2000 was utterly appalling. There's longer term work to be done. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There's that whole academy restructure, all that sort of stuff that they're putting in, and then you start to see 10 years later Neuer and Kroos and Müller and all those guys coming through. They're interesting. Diego Placente, an Argentinian that always seems to stick in my mind, as well as somebody that I quite enjoyed. He was a very good left back for them. Hans-Jörg Butt was there. Lucio was there as well. This is where he started his European career. Quite a bit of time here, to be honest. People might not remember him from there, but he was here for a few years before he went to Bayern, and obviously on to Serie A. Just a terrific 2000s defender. Kind of one of those guys perfect for Italian football, I think, at the time. Mentioned Michael Ballack, 𝐿 I mentioned earlier on as well. Just a really nice number 10 in there. Oliver Neuville up top. Which was, I guess, one of those players I was maybe liking to, kind of like a Christophe Dugarry type player, like a support striker that maybe should be playing off of a striker, but in this one he wasn't. He quite an interesting setup. We'll probably maybe we'll go into it more in the final, but it was almost like a 3-5-1-1. This one, I would say it wasn't. There was no wingers at all. It was essentially 5 central midfielders, if you want to call it that. You got Bastard playing as the 10, Michael Ballack, Vidaric and Schneider as the 3 in the middle, Carsten Ramelow, another great 2000s central midfield name. They were functional. I was very surprised they got as far as they got, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But I think in Michael Ballack, they had somebody in there who it was just very obvious it was a breakout season for him. He was an absolute star of this, and then obviously would go on to great success at Bayern as well. So one of those ones that a team just appears and they've got a ready-made star there who's going to be a household name for the rest of the decade, essentially.
I loved him.
I loved him.
He had that German, arrogant, striding about a pitch like he owned it thing that I love. He was such an elegant player, and the fact that he went to England and he could still play the game at his pace, I think is always a sign of a good player. Obviously, it all came from watching Barry in '98.
Of course.
I love 𝐿. He was a great player as well. A young Dimitar Berbatov as well, kicking about that
his lovely touch.
They will be the short team. One more thought, Adam. I think it's percolating there.
What I was going to say is just interesting with Ballack, and I guess this is something that we don't see now, and it sort of hit me when we were looking at Jaap Stam's transfer to Lazio as well. Like, Michael Ballack is 25, 26 here, and he's having his kind of breakout. Like, that just doesn't happen anymore. Like, you look at Bellingham just as the example that shines in my head, and the breakout seasons for these guys are 18 now. Jaap Stam was the one that I had to double check. He went to Man United when he was in his late 20s, like 27, and you're like, that just seems, what are you doing in Holland for 5 or 6 years before that? It's just not happening anymore. And I guess it's not great, because we don't get these club sides appearing now. If they do, they get broken up very, very quickly. But there's no chance your Michael Ballacks and your Jaap Stams are playing in their domestic leagues until that age without having serious interest or without anybody really knowing who they are. If you like Ballack never got a cap for Germany until he was 23, 24 at this stage of that just now. He'd be getting capped when he was about 12 probably for the German national team. So there's no hiding place anymore, but it's funny how these players you just assume they've been great players since they were born, but really Ballack's, like I said, 25, almost 26 before he's having.
Do you know what I think is one of the reasons, or one of the times where I began to think, this is now a thing, and I think it has sped up because, as we've mentioned, even on this show, everybody in football copies everybody. Arsenal and Cesc Fabregas and Nicolas Anelka, when Wenger started going round, youth leagues and say, I'll just take these guys, and clubs were like, what? This isn't Sporting.
Piqué went early, didn't he?
Piqué, a great example, yeah. And now, of course, they all do it, and they're signing kids or get their eyes on kids from 8 years old and stuff. But back then, it was such a revelation that you would go to another club's youth team, and particularly abroad, and sign a guy, and then it became that everybody has to watch everybody to be aware. And I think you're absolutely right. The idea now that Ballack could have been allowed to develop slowly, it would not happen because people would pick up on his potential at least, and he'd be signed by a big club 18, 19.
Just to circle that off, I know Ballack is going to feature quite heavily over the next couple of weeks, and he's a huge player for Bayern. But that outlier internationally with Germany getting to that final in Japan and Korea, I know there's a whole host of issues with that particular World Cup and teams that probably should have gone further and didn't for dubious reasons, but it's not a great Germany team. He drags them to that final and suspended. He can't play in the final, but still I think scores the goal in the semi-final that gets them there, even though he knew he was suspended, had that booking. He was just such a monumental individual force at driving still good teams, but in the context of the wider tournament and the wider kind of competition, lesser. I think it's probably fair to say he just carried himself. But you're right, he carries himself like a guy in his mid-20s, and we would expect that now. And it's what makes guys like Bellingham so freakish, is that they're carrying themselves like a 28-year-old when they're 18, and it's that kind of presence that that he had, and it'll be good to remember that, not just over this season, but some of the others to come. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.